Jolly West, Dr. Jolly West, as part of MK Ultra, he was running a program to send informants into like teen gangs and groups to groom them and see if they could be radicalized and how you could introduce new ideas, violent ideas into these groups. So right away, number one, there's a long history of this kind of intel operation, MK Ultra stuff, experimenting, targeting teenagers, and seeing how they can be radicalized.
People are consuming Catch from the Rye on the first degree level of just the emotional feelings they get from it, or they'll listen to this death metal music, of KMFDM. They'll listen to it for the pure emotional reasons, but some people will go deeper into the lyrics. They'll go deeper to the next level, and that small percentage will then be susceptible to all sorts of traps that are set for them on that deeper level below the symbols.
Like it comes back to the same kind of question we'd have to ask in respect to our knowledge about anything, right? It's like you got to look at the details of a case, and there are red flags. And so if you see red flags, and somebody who doesn't believe in conspiracy theories usually just rationalizes these things. Oh, of course there's FBI informants, they're trying to stop terrorism. Of course they're going to, okay, but like, did they give weapons or not? Like, what was their actual
Did they
role?
recruit? Did they radicalize the members of the cell? Are they like...
Yeah. Mr. Normie is not interested in like asking those questions.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, when you scratch on the surface of a lot of these personalities like J.D. Salinger, like Robert Heinlein, you find usually not some authentic emergent creator, even though their books and their writings have become iconic and influential. Elon Musk said the greatest work that ever influenced his identity is Robert Heinlein's The Moon is a Cruel Mistress.
At this point, if anyone's still like, maybe somebody has a gag reflex and they're like, oh, this sounds schizo, though you probably would have tuned out earlier if it felt like. But imagine there still is somebody listening, and it's like, okay, is this schizo? There's all these different patterns and things. You at least want to like take a look, right? Like, what are the actual details of the case? And a lot of people who just want to dismiss things, right, because they don't believe in conspiracies, which again, my take is it's just as radical to believe to think you don't believe in any conspiracies as like the QAnon, Q-tard, like full hog, everything's a conspiracy. Like, they're both just as radical, right? The real question is, some conspiracies are real, some are made up, and how can we use our discernment to know what's what?
All right, welcome everybody to this Canadian Patriot podcast, where I'm once again joined by my good friend David Gosselin, who has done a lot of thinking. He's been thinking about thinking, just as I have. And most importantly now, and relevant for today's conversation, thinking about the causes of why these strange, naturally emergent things happen, like terrorism, mass shootings. Are these naturally occurring endemic problems with society? We recently were both recording from Canada, from Quebec, I'm close to Montreal. Dave is in Montreal, and just a week ago there was another mass shooting. Canada is not well known for tons of mass shootings, but there was one about a week ago. A few people died, and of course, you're seeing now all sorts of typical, within 2 seconds, messaging about the warning of more copycat killers, the need for greater powers over Canada's spy agencies, intelligence agencies to monitor the dangerous behavior of Canadians and what have you. And it seems like there's a pattern here. So we were talking about the fact that when you scratch on a lot of these stories, things break down, the common narratives break down, whether you're talking about the official story of 9/11 or the Christmas tree bomber or the underwear bomber or almost any case of emergent...
The pajama bomber.
No, the pajama bomber, whatever. You can just make them up, right? But every time you seem to scratch on cases of domestic terror, either intervened upon or that actually went a pretty big distance to end lives, or international terrorism of a Muslim or other variety, you seem to get the story will fall apart. So in this case, Dave, you were actually there. And we'll use this as a gateway into the bigger question of like serial killers, school shooters, public shooters, what have you. to just map out any anomalies that we might have come across either in the present or in the past. But the entry point will be, I guess, this current case in Côte-des-Neiges. You were there, you scoped it out, you talked to some people. What did you see? Do you find that that is passing the smell test of what we've been told about just some like random guy who hates Jews who went shooting up the place because he hates Jews, and that's sort of how it's being framed? Or do you think that does it seem like there's more going on?
It always seems like there's more going on, Matt, doesn't it?
Always.
Yeah, it's actually, yeah, obviously on the ground, it's always interesting because you kind of feel like, yeah, you're on the ground right after like some false flag or active shooter event. So obviously you got all sorts of people uh, right away, theorizing. And um, I heard even like, yeah, of course they were saying, oh, this was in a Jewish neighborhood and da da da. I mean, it's on the carry. There's all sorts of different, uh, there's a Filipino neighborhood right across. It's like, it's just all, there's a lot of different people there. So yeah, obviously based on everything that's we've seen, even the manifesto stuff, there's nothing about that, right? I think those are just like people just speculating right away. But what I found interesting as well, of course, the other main theory, and I was talking to like my boomer aunt about this, and you beta test, right? If you have a theory, first you're gonna run it with a few regular folks, right, and see like how they react. And of course, the one that she was responding to was that, yeah, this was an anti-feminist. This is incel stuff. And, these poor kids, they're isolated and they do terrible things. I mean, she didn't feel bad for the kid, but yeah, the idea that like, this is the problem. This is the fault of the internet and, technology. And it's now just a lot easier for people to be radicalized. And while it's true, you could argue it's become easier or to radicalize people or yeah, I mean there's just different ways, but I was curious right away after looking on the ground. Yeah, the guy didn't kill who he was supposed to kill. So the first question was, he was shooting into this window. All the media were showing the window that he shot into, but not where he shot from. And like what was there, they weren't really talking much about that. Like who was actually in those offices? Were they offices? Were they apartments? It's not clear because the cleaning ladies that I was talking to outside, they said they're apartments. So was the person who was this supposed high level, CEO or whatnot in Pornhub, were they really staying there? Was anyone even there? Was it like a failed thing, right? Did he just like shoot and missed and then the person got away? Like, was the person supposed to die? Was it maybe, I was thinking like we've seen with the Mangione killings where, there was a very high level CEO of United Health that was just killed right on the street. And the narrative's always that these are disturbed people, but technically these have always been the targets for like MK Ultra style programmed assassin uh, programs, right? Like in Gregory Bateson, the Veterans Hospital, and the prison system. Like that's where Jolly West. That's where they were looking for people that could be used, right, for these kind of decentralized like assassination cells or whatnot, because you already have a cover story, right, that the person was ill. They've been through the system, so you could say that's why they did it.
You're talking
Or
about are you talking about the Montreal shooter at this point?
no, just
No.
that in the six going
Oh, in the
back to the
60s. Okay.
60s from the start of these programs.
Right.
And like Jolly West, Dr. Jolly West, he as part of MK Ultra, he was running a program to send informants into like teen gangs and groups to groom them and see if they could be radicalized and how you could introduce new ideas, violent ideas into these groups. So right away, number one, there's a long history of this kind of intel operation MK Ultra stuff, experimenting, targeting teenagers, and seeing how they can be radicalized. And then fast forward to today, and I was just looking at, we were both talking about different mass shooter cases, and so I was poking around. And my main question was the Montreal shooter like on any forums, right? Was he talking to other people? And you find from Columbine up until now, Littleton, I mean, there's always forums, right? There's always some, online community. And well, that's where, they presumably got radicalized, but it's like, this is the beginning of DARPA being mainlined, right? This is the beginning of the internet cybernetic system, right? Being brought online, where you have these echo chambers and these perfect feedback loops, right? Like the Discord server is technically like the perfect cybernetic system. And then you just read that, like, the 624, I believe they're called, the
764 cult 764.
764
Yeah.
satanic sort of online cult that preys on children, minors, gets them to,
Yeah,
like,
okay, so how does that work? Because you just introduced me to this weird cult. I wasn't that familiar with them so much before this week. But how does that work? Like, how do they deconstruct some innocent young person who's just like a normal kid going to school? All of a sudden, they're engaging in a chat room with somebody who seems like a nice person, and before you know it, they're being deconstructed and being brought into this ritual humiliation thing where they begin to first. I mean, they're
yeah,
terrible things are done to them before they become, as is often the case. Oftentimes, if they don't commit suicide, purveyors are actual abusers. The abused becomes the abuser, and they move on in their levels. So,
yeah.
you know,
Well, yeah, no, from what I was looking at, I mean, the first thing is they're remarkably well organized, and, basic anomalies. These things were being reported by Discord to the FBI and the authorities. And what do you think happened? They weren't doing anything, right?
mm,
Despite always the paranoia about terrorists and whatnot. Like, when these things were actually reported, they didn't do anything for the longest time, and this thing was just ongoing. They're blackmailing kids, getting them to record CP, and then, you have to kill your cat, on stream if you don't want us to share this stuff. And obviously, again, these are people that are isolated, right? So there's always this
mm.
kind of echo chamber, cybernetic chamber, if you will, that people are operating in. And then you see there's all related phenomena. There's the Order of Nine Angles that I was looking into the work of William Ramsey, which is just an overt occult online sort of satanic, kind of Discord internet community. So they're all like, there's a modus operandi here of all these groups. And yeah, when they, in the 764 case, when the ringleader was busted, it only grew, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, their methods of manipulation and getting people caught in this web, they're very advanced, right? So how are these 16-year-olds are operating with, like, advanced CIA manuals on sort of getting people blackmailed and caught and entangled into this web that, is so, has such a hold on them that they're like killing their pets on stream, or like, doing all sorts
Or
of
worse, yeah.
harm.
And they're even like carving in, like, their whoever is their abuser, their handler, that they start getting this weird. In some cases, that there is apparently the psychological, what do you call it, the this I this tendency to, the Stockholm syndrome, right? There's a Stockholm syndrome effect where they
Mm.
start feeling an enmeshment with their abuser, and they start carving in even the name or the initials of their abuser, and whatever else that the abuser asks them. I guess in this case it was this name. I wrote down his name, Bradley Haddonhead, I guess, was this founder of this cult.
Right.
And yeah, like, he would have his victims willingly carve not just his name, but also swastikas, a lot of self-immolation. One parent had to, like, when she discovered what her daughter was doing, had to, like, commit the daughter and completely cut her off from any access to the internet, and hardly any part of her torso. There's hardly a bit of any skin uh that wasn't cut. So that there's something really, really messed up, but they start feeling the need to go back on it. It's not always just fear that things that I did and filmed are going to be exposed. There's a lot of that too, but then sometimes there's this other weird need. So like you said, it's so sophisticated. This kid Bradley is like 16 years old when he sets this up. There's no way he has access to this level of sophisticated psychological brainwashing technique. And you alluded to the incel community, which is a strange thing, is unto itself, right? It kind of emerged in one form in the 90s, but it became something virulent That also lends itself, as we see now, to acts of terrorism in some cases, because the idea of our personal inability to get laid, to have a relationship, is like caused by, there's this whole surprisingly, like, when you read like the manifestos of some of these shooters who are part of the incel communities, there's like they're quite well read. They're
Yeah,
quite well read. It reads like a scholarly philosophical treatise, kind of like reading Ted Kaczynski
yeah,
and the
right.
Unabomber manifestos. It's surprisingly scholarly, with citations of various, Marxist dialectic theoreticians, but they pretty much just blame all of industrial civilization for the cause of their personal problems, and then they different aspects might blame women to varying degrees, or pornography, Pornhub, I
Based
think
on
was,
capitalism, like in
yeah,
his case, right? Because some people were like, "Oh no, he couldn't be part of like that neo-Nazi community because he was espousing communist sort of ideas, and like the communists are against the not, they're
right,
on different sides." But like, yeah, so he's railing against capitalism and the effects of capitalism, and sort of the corruption of values
right.
and morals. But it's not really, how different is that from Kaczynski complaining about what has caused the destruction of sort of our ecosystems, and how modern society has sort of accelerated this, the degeneration and destruction of everything that's important to mankind, unleashing demons that possess people and want them to become consumers, and yeah, materialism. So the arguments are actually very similar, right? And so right then, if people are getting caught up at that level, they're like, well, one's communist, one's okay. Well, that's already, no, they're these are just, there's like a handedness, right? Like, is it a left hand or right hand thing? They're not exactly the same. Your left hand, your right hand are almost identical, but they're not.
Yeah.
um so yeah, there's something more. All that to say, when I was talking to my boomer aunt, I was like, well, the whole point though is like there's a whole history here. There's a lot of context to this phenomena, and sort of just trying to frame it as some anti-feminist incel. I heard other people right away. They're just running with that, right? Which is what the media put out. So it's just so convenient, and it just ignores the fact that there have been these programs to target and radicalize young people, and the effectiveness of like creating cults, right? Going back to, kind of always goes back, and not to always bring it back to the 60s and Manson, but that's like the kind of model for like, this is how you can recruit young people and repattern people, and what do you need? And it seems kind of very, people from the, oh, it's some guru, right? He's very manipulative, but it's like, no, there's all sorts of techniques and like research going back to Tavistock, World War II, and like brainwashing and shell shock, that and hypnosis, that are all at play there. Like Manson, he learned hypnosis, he was taught different techniques, he was fed a very, very narrow but very specific
So
uh,
yeah.
items.
So what you're saying right now might surprise some listeners. And I know you had recently read Chaos, the CIA, and the Manson Family book. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Right.
I used it in
And
the last chat, so yeah.
okay. Yeah, no, so there's a lot of people who might think of Charles Manson as just another cult leader who had his own cult, as an independent thing, might be surprised to hear that that's not the case, and that the CIA, there's solid evidence that the CIA and leading psychiatrists from MK Ultra were managing both Manson, the growth of Manson as a personality and what he created. Um, but then also more broadly out of Haight-Ashbury, the uh, so much of what the hippies went through was actually being influenced, though they may not even know it. People who live through that today might be shocked. I mean, it's less and less. I think there's a greater awareness of the hands of intelligence agencies, and psychiatrists that didn't have their well-being at heart. Let's just say that. But maybe could you say a little bit more about like how did that express itself? How did MK Ultra shape both like or MK Ultra affiliated psychiatrists? How did they shape Manson as a person, and then the hippie movement, and the cults of the 60s and 70s more generally?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've continued to look into it, and yeah, there's just so many different elements, right, to the story as well, which is,
Mm,
I think some people get caught up because there's like, what was the main intention? But it's like there could be, when you're running certain kinds of psyops, like there's many intentions, right? There's many
mm,
different goals. Like in the last chat, we were talking about, yeah, just when people are paranoid, right? Low intensity operations, as they're called. It's rather than one abrupt cat event or catastrophe, you're keeping the level of stress and paranoia to a certain level that just stops people from really, you know, having a clear head, right? Like in the United States, right, from mass shootings to terrorist attacks and all these things, like what is the goal of each operation, right? If you want to just separate them independently, okay, like, yeah, the strategic goals of any one thing are sometimes, what was the strategic goal of the Boston bombings, or it's not
mm,
always clear,
mm,
right? Or it was like foiled, but just the creating a level of paranoia where people are afraid from during the Manson period, that somebody could come through your window and satanically, ritually kill you.
mm,
In Hollywood, it was probably a very strong message to people in Hollywood, right? That like no one was untouchable, number one. So maybe if some people weren't falling in line, that was their cue to fall in line. That was probably also an element.
right.
And yeah, Manson he even had an article published in the Process Church of Satan magazine. And, there's been this big thing where like official research even claims like no, Manson wasn't part of the Process Church, da, 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 and like there was blowback because they published it like, oh, how could they, or but there was like a temple just 2 streets away from like in his neighborhood, and I was reading just like the description of books that were offered in one of the libraries, and it's all stuff on like what from antinatalism and like just philosophies of destruction to hypnosis, right? So everyone in these process church and satanic uh, organization, there's a lot of stuff on hypnosis and using hypnosis, and Manson was actually good at that. If you listen to I because I did a fair bit of research on neurolinguistic programming, transformations and stuff. And one of the things in hypnosis is really using ambiguity in a structured way, where you're being vague, but you're systemically vague, where you're creating new gaps in people's thinking, because the mind automatically wants to impose a meaning on a statement, right? When you hear a statement, you have assumptions about what it means. And so if you make your statements in a way that they're just vague enough and they're structured in a systematic way, you're creating these new gaps for people, for the mind to fill in automatically. And so Manson was actually, when you listen to his rants, like he has rants, some of them are on YouTube, and like there's so many fan comments as well. They're like, wow, this is so deep. Um, they're just ramblings, but it's like, come on, America, the ship is coming. You know what time it is. Don't let that asteroid hit you. And he's just going to keep throwing in things. But then there seems to be a meaning. And you're like, well, what does he really mean? Like, what is he getting at? He's like metaphorical at some points. Um, and,
It's
don't
fascinating.
be afraid of
Yeah,
fire.
right.
The moon is bright, my
It's
friend.
fascinating because by just being aware that the human mind has a nature to it, like that's why we will pay money for a puzzle and put the puzzle together. There's no business model that's ever demonstrated any success that starts with something all ordered that you're supposed to just break apart. Like there's this, and just knowing that we have this instinct, this like just like the body needs to breathe and have food, the mind yearns for wholeness, to piece together the unknown. That's part of like just the impulses of the mind, but by being sensitive to that, they can then use that impulse to our own enslavement or misdirection.
Yeah.
So you can create these controlled ambiguities, like you were saying, knowing that people will then, if they sense that there's a pattern that seems to be tempering the chaos, that it's not really chaos, then they will presume that maybe you have a wisdom that is behind your symbolic language. right, the imagery that you're using, they will presume that there was a higher wisdom for them to discover, and people who fall into that spell will be much more inclined to be, I guess, partially hypnotically induced or just enchanted, right, by the spell of whatever it is that you're saying,
It's
and
also,
increasingly dislodge themselves from their own discernment and their own power of judging, of having faith in their own judgment, right? The more you give them things like that.
yeah, I mean, like, again, the goal is that you create a light state of confusion.
Mm.
And so you're bypassing the reflective systems because you can't, yeah, you can't make sense of it at a sort of conscious, rational level, but you see there's a pattern, right? You detect something. And so the whole point of the ambiguity is to induce a light state of confusion, at which point then it's much easier to introduce new ideas because people are like, they're not sure what it is. And once you're in that state of perplexity and you offer something new, so yeah, that was it. So Manson used that, and in the book Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA and the Secret History of the '60s. Tom O'Neill alludes that, like, yes, somebody seemed to have taught Manson hypnosis. Like he would meet somebody, whether it was like in a bar or something. Like different people were giving him different tricks. People were reading him. So I don't think he was literate. I think they were reading to him "A Stranger in a Strange Land" in prison. So that's another one that's written by Robert Heinlein. It's a guy who establishes an alien sex cult.
On
That's
Mars.
really, yeah,
Yeah.
that's really what it is. And that's where he got his rituals, right? That's where he got the idea of like grokking. So there's like a lexicon that's introduced. There's the water sharing rituals. So right there, you're like introducing all these kind of the idea of like experiential knowledge, which is a big thing for these kind of Luciferian circles. So like initiation and things that just kind of submerge the person in this new reality. It was all done very well, right, by Manson or by whatever was controlling that experiment, such that yeah, like one of the members tried to kill President Ford. Like they weren't just killing a Hollywood celebrity, or like they had targets, which is weird, right? And one of them just got out of prison. It wasn't that long ago. And she was still didn't like when they were like, "Do you regret what you did?" Like she justified why. Like no, she was kind of arguing why it was necessary at the time, like with
Like
what everything was
45
going on.
years later, she's
Yeah,
still in the
yeah,
spell.
so yeah, they're still in it. So like yeah, that's not.
Huh.
And that was the other thing made me think of like the whole in academia. It was you had all these kind of like Hannah Arendt and Frankfurt School social theory idea of the authoritarian personality and the gurus, right? How like cults are created. And the lie is, or I'd say the ruse is, they're always just treating it as like a sociological phenomenon, like what creates authoritarian personalities or cult leaders. But if we look at like every case of all these cults, right, like all the research that is well known, there's always intelligence operatives or experiments going on. These cults are not, they don't exist in a vacuum. They don't just exist isolated in whatever, the Utah desert or the California desert in some compound. There's people overseeing that. So you never hear that from any of these experts on dictatorships and tyranny. Not one of them talks about like an oligarchy, and intelligence agencies
Yeah.
creating cults, which is
Yeah.
weird, right? And
Yeah.
that's the main discourse on these
Okay.
things.
So you got another book. I was reading from, I think the first time I heard this was from the article that I read from you on predictive programming. I think you mentioned this, or maybe I heard it from somewhere else, but I think it was from you, that the other thing that Manson was reading in prison, overseen by these intelligence agents, was both Heinlein's Stranger on a Strange Land, but also Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard.
Right.
And you've done
Right.
work on NLP, neurolinguistic programming as a sub branch, a sub tool of hypnosis more broadly. So one, how would you, what would have been the value of L. Ron Hubbard's Dianetics for this project of creating the Charles Manson post prison experience and cult leader. And how does NLP play into that process of brainwashing of the individual, and how can they use that to build their cults?
Yeah, well, and I haven't read the like all the technical stuff for Dianetics. I have the book actually, and it's very it seems quite esoteric at
Mm.
first. Like it's a different framework than like NLP or cybernetics, but there's certain commonalities. And I was looking, it came out around, it wasn't that long after the
It's
whole
like 19,
cybernetics
yeah, it's like
stuff.
1951. So it was
Yeah.
like right before he creates the Scientology cult as a religious cult, and like right after, yeah, Cybernetics is announced by Norbert Wiener. It's like same time, totally. It's the intersection.
Yeah, but it is about like Dianetics is self-help. It's like one of the original self-help books
Hmm.
that popularized everything, that we know about like guru, grifting, hustling culture, from Tony Robbins to L. Ron Hubbard to all these guys. Yeah, they kind of started that. So there's always an emphasis on the self and a mystical kind of self, right? Because at first they just, as we were saying, yeah, we were talking about Carl Jung, and like at the surface, it's a lot of like, yeah, how do you process some past bad experience, or like how do you get rid of these limiting beliefs? We've all had different values and things imposed on us from childhood, and how do we, and there's like a shadow of things that haven't been processed or integrated, that we can't really be free until these things are brought into the light. But that's like only the first phase for anyone who follows through with like Jungian analysis. It quickly goes from just kind of self-help stuff that's, can be useful, right? Like NLP, pattern interrupts, like visualizations. If you've never visualized a better life for yourself and what it would actually look like, and you're like in the throes of like, you're struggling with like addiction or like coming from an abusive family, it's going to be hard for that person to break out of their patterns of behavior if they can't even identify some alternative view of themselves and a healthier narrative, which is truer, right? Which is healthier, because the narrative they have is false, right? They've had all these things imposed on them. So that's all good, but like that's not where it stops. Like
Mm.
once you get through that kind of self-help pop psychology phase, then we've been talking like it
Yeah.
starts to get into like Mithra and lions and snakes. And you have the quote there that I just shared with you. This is uh
Yeah, I
I
can
have
I
it.
can pull
It's
it up here.
telling. Yeah, I have it right here though.
Oh, you got it?
um yeah, so this is Jung, right? So Jung is supposedly a psychologist, but yet his big thing is alchemy, right? Once you're done with, if you really want to go deeper, right, you're better now. You don't have these neuroses, but are you happy? Are you now yearning for something more? This is Carl Jung. He says, for the alchemist, the one primarily in need of redemption is not man, but the deity, who is lost and sleeping in matter. Only a secondary consideration does he hope that some benefit may accrue to himself from the transformed substance as the panacea, the medicine catholica, just as it may to the imperfect bodies, the base or sick metals. His attention is not directed to his own salvation through God's grace, but to the liberation of God from the darkness of matter.
Hmm.
Now, yeah, that's a weird thing to say. Like, okay, so this is what's being brought in, and I've spoken with people that have.
The liberation of God from the darkness of matter is the goal, or the focus. So what does that? Yeah, what does this mean to you? What do you get out of this statement?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking about, well, again, in terms of alchemy, right? So
Mm.
alchemy is, there's the idea of like combinations, the art of combinations, and yeah, mixing different metals, right, to get something pure that's kind of trapped or lost inside through some magical combination of different disparate elements that, when brought together, produce a transformation. So it really is about, if you're applying that to human psychology, it's like, yeah, you're going to take, I don't know, maybe you'll take the darkness and the light,
Yeah.
you'll take your two selves, and they'll be forged together,
Yeah.
and out of that will emerge something that is neither darkness nor light, but pure sort of awareness
Yeah.
or freedom, your pure self,
Yeah.
right? Which is no longer bound by all the assumptions or axioms and things that people have been fed by society. So you're free, and you're now kind of an alchemist,
Yeah.
right?
I get that sense too. It feels like a demonological invocation. Listening to the language is that you're beginning to reframe how you see yourself, not as somebody who needs healing. Uh, like that's how people often think, right? Is that we need healing. There's something wrong with us, and and if you're religious, it would be through the concept of God's grace, that God loves you, that this higher force loves you, will have a role to play in the healing process. But this is reframing the idea of what the self is as like it's not us that needs healing. It's actually that there's this latent sleeping God trapped in matter, that you're made of matter, I guess, that the psychologist, they're saying, just like the alchemist, is trying to awaken this deity, this force that's trapped in your matter. And so you're moving the person's identity out of themselves and into this other thing. And
Right.
then as that's becoming awoken, as you're pointing out, there's like this fusion of the self with the other, or maybe the switching up of the other deity figure, whatever this thing
Right.
is that we're now going to identify with, that is
Well, that's the
divine.
psyche, right?
Yeah,
In their
right.
sort of lexicon. So the psyche is not, yeah, it's not necessarily you, right? Because there's a collective psyche,
Mm-hmm.
right, that everyone can kind of tap into, or that everyone is tapped into, but maybe operating at a unconscious level. So yeah, there's something that is not just, it's not your soul per se. There's a psyche that is this mystical thing.
Mm.
Um, and there was something else we're just
The psyche, is that kind of like the archetypical aspect?
well, this is where it gets very mystical, right? Like, what does he mean by the psyche? It kind of the more you get people talk, it just kind of sounds like a Luciferian sort of. It's like the primeval force
Mm.
of in the universe. And
Mm.
again, I mean, Jung has talked about like the importance of evil, right? He has quotes where like that's what Goethe's Faust got him thinking about that. But then he was like, he was sad because Goethe didn't like fully embrace that Faustian,
Mm.
evil. And yeah, he saw that as something necessary. And like, you're not supposed to judge things. That's the other thing in Jungian analysis. Like the shadow, don't judge it, because as soon as you judge it, you're imposing your assumptions. You're projecting, right? So like everything is projection in Jungian. Like any value that you impose on a thing is just you, like you think there's killers out there that want to kill, or satanic. Like I had this with a friend, right, who well, former friend, he didn't like me eventually when we had these conversations. But yeah, like a lot of the Jungian folks, they don't really have a concept of like history or like intelligence agencies or like all these things that we talk about. Everything from them is like a psycho social phenomena. So you thinking there's like these satanic, witch covens, or, process church and assassination rings, that's you imposing unresolved things
Yeah.
onto the world. So you see bad guys everywhere, but like you have some bad guy in you that you just haven't integrated. And so you can't really think at that point, right?
Yeah,
Like think
right.
about history, and you're just using myth to interpret everything as well, which Jung understood the role, or like the power of myth, right? Which, I mean, all the cults, right? They all have sacred stories. You got to give people new sacred stories, right? New mythos, new legends. So yeah, that adds to it in terms. And so all these mass shooters as well, right? They have some pretty wild, uh, you know, ideas about like the story of man, and a lot of them with the nine angle order of the nine angles, or these 764. There's like a lot of antinatalism. So bringing human beings into the world is wrong,
Yeah.
because the world is evil, and you're just going to uh, be imposing values onto this new person, that are not natural. And yeah, so
It's very Gnostic,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
all
Like that's the core of Gnosticism, or one of the core foundational beliefs common to all of the different myriad of Gnostic sects, is that ultimately the human flesh, anything material or that exists in the physical world, the universe, that includes also, I guess, uh, the reason, how because reason exists to try to map out and help us map out and make sense of and move in the physical worlds. The reason is also the use of it also ties us to matter. It's actually just another form of materialism. The concepts of judging right and wrong that emanate out of reason are also just another form of matter, and that all form of matter is thus is a prison of the body, of the flesh, of the universe. It's all a prison, and the best you could do is figure out rituals to break free of any connection you have to reason, to the discernment of judgment of right and wrong, that are all keeping you locked into the customs, the traditions that you didn't create, you were born into. So you're a slave to the things that you didn't create. Only things that you generate from within yourself are you not a
right.
slave to. So then
Yep.
everything is a ritual to figure out how do you break that individual, the initiate, free of the other, of the right, and in so doing, then
And
yeah,
that
you
quickly goes
hmm?
to breaking taboos, right? So that's where you got to like free
Break through the
yourself from
boundaries. Yeah.
societal norms, right? So you have to do things where, you have to do
Mm.
high stakes things that most people are not brave or willing, like depends how you want to character, or not crazy enough to do. Near death experiences, if you're really serious, like, are you willing to die for this? That's always not a good sign, right? If you're in something and they're like, are you willing to die for this? Like, obviously, then you could say, well, hey, American Revolution or fighting Hitler, yeah, you may have, but that's why it's kind of nefarious, because you start finally they're appealing to like people's sense. They're appealing in a twisted way to people's. Everyone has a kind of innate moral, uh, you know, there's a voice or there's something inside that knows certain things are good, certain things are bad, and they're trying to elicit that, but like in a very twisted. They're trying to make you, yeah, associate that with things that are you probably shouldn't be associating it with,
Right.
and yeah,
Well, yeah, I from gathering the readings of members of the Process Church and having read some of their magazines there where they lay out this this very twisted logic, as well as some of the Manson family followers, there's always this reframing. This is the NLP thing again, that death is not death. Death is actually liberation. So that
right,
when the Manson family is sent out to go play stab and kill, various people in Hollywood, they're not actually killing them. They're not ending their life. They're liberating them, right?
right,
They're liberating their whatever their essence is, their spirit. Um, and
right,
I think you tend to get this idea, and amongst a lot of the cults with the Gnostic sort of underpinning, is that the justification for human sacrifice, whether it's of a child or whatever, is again that you're actually doing a gift for the child. You're doing a gift for the human sacrifice because you're giving it experiences for the next life. Or maybe you're just enacting the karma from the past life that accrued bad karma, and
right.
now you could just say, well, based on the fact that this being, I don't know how they come to the conclusion that that particular child must be the consequence of past lives ill lived, such
Yeah.
that they need to be abused, mutilated, and all of these terrible things that you hear about on Epstein's Island or in pizza loving communities. You're like, well, they're actually providing experiences for the soul's maturation or liberation from the prison of the flesh, whatever. It's pretty sick. It's
Yeah, there's that, and also just like the Saturnian idea of
mm,
sacrifice, and like whether it's one of your own children or something, right? The old kind of pagan, going back to what are Canaanites and all that as well, is that like uh, you're gonna have to give an offering to God or the gods. Like, you're going to have to sacrifice one way or the other, because there is suffering in life. Now the question is, are you willing to offer a sacrifice willingly that at least you have some control over? at least some of the terms, versus otherwise God's just going to take it from you anyway, right? He will exact sacrifice from this world and from everyone. So like Baal, I mean, it was like a fertility cult, right? The idea was that you needed to sacrifice if you wanted to have like a good harvest, if you didn't want to have drought. So that was the exchange, is you were offering up something to God to show that you were true, right? And that you
Right.
really you were serious about your relationship with nature and creation. So it was like a pious thing to do. Now, do they actually think that, or do they just use that as an excuse as well? Or there's a lot of different degrees, right? But there's that idea as well. So like people who don't think sacrifice is required, human sacrifice, right? Like there will all a great cause will require the sacrifice of people, which means of blood and all these things, right? So you can see how they create this whole thing around that. And yeah, so like Christianity kind of made civilization weak, right? Because it kind of did away with sacrifice and these, or like there was Jesus was sacrificed. Now you don't have to. Hey guys, calm down. Like it's over now. You don't have to keep sacrificing people. So yeah, that irked a lot of the older cults, right? Because that they don't believe that. They don't like, and everybody needs to sort of earn their stripes, right?
Well, yeah, I noticed that like the currents within the various philosophical movements, Christianity, Judaism earlier, Platonism, is that when you read the writings of like a lot of the leading Jewish prophets in the Book of Chronicles and the Book of Kings and throughout the Old Testament, there does seem to be a general tendency towards battling the cults that demand human sacrifice. So the amount of attacks against Baal and Moloch worship, which is human and often child sacrifice, is prevalent throughout the Old Testament. You got it clearly defined in the idea that we don't have to sacrifice anything, animals, whatever. With the Christian, with the concept of Jesus's sacrifice, that's it. It's over now. Like move on to a better way of living as a human being from that point on. But you got that with Plato too, when he has Socrates in the Euthyphro dialogue, having a discussion about, the day before he's about, or the same day he's about to later on be sentenced to death for corrupting the minds of the youth. The foundational first dialogue that Plato writes is the Euthyphro before the Apology, where he's having a discussion about piety and what is our idea of piety. And the honoring of the gods. How do we think about the gods and our relationship to the transcendental? And do the gods really care about human sacrifice, or what humans sacrifice to the gods? Do the gods want anything? Do they need anything?
Do they really need any of
And he demonstrates that no, we just using pure reason. It's a gorgeous dialogue. And he clearly pisses off this young pompous idiot who thinks he knows better than anybody else about what the gods want. And even if that means, killing his own father, which is going to be the consequence of him bringing his father to the courts, so be it, because he's a conduit for the will of the gods in the mind of this pompous, prideful, sophist young jackass who he's talking to.
Right.
But yeah, it's just constantly the theme everywhere you go. It's don't honor the gods through killing other people. It's just they don't need that. It's not right. Think about it some more.
Right.
Yeah. But so okay, so we got here now. MK Ultra. Could you maybe like fold in a little bit for the audience? We talked about MK Ultra, but maybe some people might be a little bit confused. What is that? As a thing, and then maybe say a little bit more. We talked about Manson. We alluded to Ted Kaczynski, who himself, I'll just say it, was also an MK Ultra guinea pig at the Harvard psilocybin project under the oversight of Ram Dass, Timothy Leary, who are working at the Harvard psilocybin project for the CIA. So they were actually experimenting on poor Ted Kaczynski as a student, who then comes out of this process with what turns out to be his own gigantic worldwide cult, even when he was in prison after killing a bunch of people with these mail bombs. somehow he was transformed alchemically into this academically palatable figure whose ideas are infused into philosophy and ecology textbooks in universities all across the Western world. Right. People would travel to visit him in prison as if they were going to Mecca if they were Islamic, and Medina. They would do the same thing for pilgrimage to the great guru Ted Kaczynski before he, just like they would do to Manson, right? Who had it's bloody weird.
Even Mangione has a bit of lore kind of similar. It seems like they're
Mangione, is he the guy who shot the
United
pharmacist?
Health CEO?
Huh?
The United Health CEO.
He shot. Okay, I thought I was mistaking it for the guy who in Montreal who cut off people's heads near Angrio Metro and buried them.
Luca Magnotta, yeah.
Oh, that's a different, right? Okay.
Also same street though. Also same.
So we have cult creations being generated through the science of brainwashing, hypnosis, and other things that seem to tie into these other cults. Scientology being tied into this, the Process Church, which is founded by two Scientologists.
Yeah.
Right. That's dovetailing Manson's entire like cult leading career.
Yeah, it's not a footnote. It's not
a footnote. That's relevant. That it was two Scientologists that set up the Process Church of Final Judgment. That seems to always be very close in proximity to him and his growing family. You got what he's reading in prison. You got so clearly there's something going on. L. Ron Hubbard is part of the naval intelligence somehow. There seems to be some connection to him and naval intelligence. He's got this weird obsession with the
and Navy. Just to add though, because you asked about the techniques and then I went on a bit of a tangent, but like, yeah, from again, Dianetics, ultimately they have your past lives, right? So that's another one. And like in NLP, you have one of the big ones is visualizations, and hypnosis is really, that's one of the key things, is getting people to imagine, right? You begin by imagine XYZ, and you got to really just bring the person to that place, right? You got to paint a scene till the person can kind of feel, you're on the beach, close your eyes, let me know when you can hear the wind blowing, right? And the waves crashing on the nice sunny beach. And so that you could see how, all this type of imagery manipulation from, your past lives imagery and playing out that past life, at which point you're probably going to think you should be, your behavior in this life should in some way be connected to that past life, right? Or maybe finish what your past life didn't. They're all different techniques, right? Of just getting people to identify and emote with some other thing, some other story or narrative that you can then build, right? Once people have emoted with that. And NLP came out. This one of the co-creators was the student of Gregory Bateson, Richard Bandler. And he developed NLP with his teacher, linguistics teacher, John Grinder, at Berkeley. Grinder was the linguistics professor at Berkeley for Bandler. That's a very small world, right?
That's crazy.
So all these techniques have kind of been formalized, right, and deployed in different ways. So, and they're always tied to these occult circles. So when I see these 764 and the Order of Nine Angles and all these other online groups and forums that they spread like mushrooms, right? They're just kind of everywhere. And we're supposed to be, believe that all these mass shooters who seem to be on forums were not given any cues, were not groomed, even though there are cases caught, like FBI was caught trying to get an autistic kid to do a shooting and stuff. And his father is that was an FBI informant. He was trying to lure the kid to do it. They've been caught before, but there's way more, right? We know informants and all the major terrorist events in the United States, there's not one that didn't have FBI informants playing some role. And then you'll have the normie response, oh, well, it's a fine line, right? Maybe they're trying to stop something, or you technically, if there's something, you might have informants that are around. But it's okay, but what the informants do? Did they give them weapons? What? And sometimes the answer is yes. So that's not
on that note. I'm going to say three things here. One, the fact that they destroy their own evidence and their own archival material so that no one will be able to hold them accountable for what they did with those cells is a big one. And I
Like the
just noticed here, I'll
shooters.
just,
You mean the
huh?
mass shooters, right?
Everything. Like, so start up. I'll say one thing here about Montreal again. Like I just remembered as we're speaking how the families of victims of MK Ultra in Montreal created a class action lawsuit to sue the
Hmm.
Allen Memorial Institute, which is that
Right.
building there, where that was the CIA's hub in Canada, where they did deep, terrible trauma-based mind control experiments for years under Ewan Cameron, a Tavistokian psychiatrist who oversaw this program that went on for years and years and years. There were 55 families who pulled together in 2022, were approved to go to court. I don't know the outcome yet. They wanted $1 million per family. It probably should have been a lot more than that. And it ran from 1950 to 1964. All of this information about what was done to women who were just going in with postpartum depression
Mm.
to Cameron's clinic, and were given like sensory deprivation for 7 months. Were given shock therapy to the point that they became drooling bags of mush, right? Drugs, psychedelic drugs to the nth degree that were being fed to these people to heal them.
Insulin, weird
Yeah.
insulin sort of
And these people
deprivation.
were, yeah, exactly. And these people became schizophrenic, bags of broken people. Many committed suicide. They couldn't live their lives after their healing process. And all of this was only declassified in the 1970s. They didn't, nobody, people thought they were crazy when they came out of the clinic trying to say about what abuse they'd suffered. There was no
Right.
evidence of it. No cops did any investigation. The government was complicit in covering it up. And it's only now, like
Right.
65 years later, that we have any type of real effort on the part of the kids and grandkids to try to get a little bit of justice. So you got that going on. But then you have, as far as active evidence of intelligence agencies, like, sure, we could say sometimes you need to have informants. You got to slip in an informant into a cell to take notes, get names. Sure, fine, but to what degree are they actually directing the cell? And we know that
Yeah.
there are cases where the RCMP was caught, or a special branch of the RCMP was caught. There was national federal inquiries, the McDonald Commission inquiry in 1975, overseeing the role of the RCMP in running the different FLQ terrorist cells that were
Yeah.
carrying out mass terrorist campaigns throughout the 60s, 70s. But it was proven that these were actually RCMP intelligence operatives who were the ones organizing these cells, providing them the bombs, setting them up in public settings.
Right.
And an inquiry was done in Quebec and then one federally that proved that that was the case. And when people tried to then see the evidence years later, after there's a certain time allotment whereby archival material that was part of these commissions are made available for journalists to go and look at, it was all destroyed. There's nothing left except for a few images on microfilm of a few items here and there, but everything else was destroyed. The same thing for the years that the CSIS, Canada's later this agency that replaced this branch of the RCMP that was created in the early 80s, when they were when the Air India bombing happened, because there's a lot of Khalistani separatists who are for some reason living in Canada, given sanctuary in the West Coast. Some of them got together and carried out the Air India bombing, resulting in hundreds of dead people. And it was discovered that CSIS had been following those cells for a long time and had hundreds of hours of wiretaps of the telephone calls. We only know that because it was recorded in Archives Canada or wherever the archives were kept, that this was registered. All of these hundreds of hours of wiretaps, they were all erased. So, like, why would you want to keep secret information that would otherwise clear you of all complicity in if
Sources and methods, Matthew. Sources and methods. Sorry.
it gets old. So
Yeah.
what we were saying right now about the manipulation of young malleable minds who are being radicalized in chat rooms, and
Yeah.
this personality you were saying who there's already a case that is known, that's been proven, of the radicalization of this young person by the FBI to go and carry out some act of violence.
Yeah, there was an autistic kid that he was groomed, and again, I don't have like all the details, but like that's
I
just
remember that too, though. That's why I do
yes.
remember that, and I'm thinking about like how
But
much
there's
even more
other
dangerous that now that AI is coming online and people are being
right,
convinced that AI is this self-thinking deity that they could have a relationship with almost. Now there's case that we're seeing where that could be so abused as well, knowing that this is already in play, because there's cases where this girl was encouraged to commit suicide by her AI friend that she'd
right,
been developing a relationship with, and it was coming to help her. I think it was actually designed to be like a psychotherapy AI bot that was supposed to help you through your problems and deal with your
horror,
inner turmoil and
horror.
anxiety as a young person. And its conclusion was to advise her to kill herself. And luckily, her parents discovered the conversation and intervened. But Jesus, like how could that then be used as a weapon to radicalize even more
As
influential,
someone
malleable young people?
as someone brought up, it sounds like it could be another case of a mechanical Turk, right? Where you
Mm.
think it's a machine that's like doing all the calculating or doing all the work, giving you all these answers, but like there's actually somebody inside the metal box that's
Mm.
doing things too. So yeah, who knows when the person just speaking to the actual AI, or can somebody just kind of sign into something and pretend to be the AI at a certain point? And, just depending on the searches into the AI, is something flagged and then it comes under the eyes of certain people or agencies. And then they take it from there if they think, necessary under national security or whatnot. So yeah, it gets pretty wild, but yeah, there's a lot of context for everything we're talking about. So yeah, anytime the most recent shooting, right? If somebody wants to just go head first into incel, anti-feminist, and like there's always a hysteria. Like people don't want to hear any more history or anything, right? They just latch on to the narrative and like they want to run with that. Um, but yeah, no, so many questions, right? Did the guy really come all the way here alone?
From
That's one
Alberta, right? He
question.
came from Alberta, right? He drove
Yeah,
across
which
Canada
is
just to come
far.
specifically here.
Yeah, it's super far. And
Mm.
again, yeah, like yeah, where did he get the weapons from? These are pretty fair questions. And
Yeah,
are we
you're
ever
right.
going to
Canada's not an easy place to get weapons in general. Canada's not an easy place. So, well, yeah, where
Yeah,
did he get those?
yeah. So it's definitely weird. I think he did have pictures. He was hunting before or something, so maybe he had. But even then, like, yeah, what were the weapons he was using? I've seen different things. Like, I saw one photo that the kid on the corner across the street who saw like the whole thing. I don't know where he got that picture because it was like a mounted sniper in the Hilton room. But I searched for it online and I didn't even find it anywhere. I was like, I took a picture of his other video of somebody getting arrested in the mall across the street that was on lockdown. So somebody else did get detained. They never mentioned any of that in the news. And usually you do hear things like that, right? Like we detained some other
Yeah,
suspects as a
factoid. Yeah.
precaution, but everybody was cleared.
Yeah.
There was no mention at all that another person was detained
Mm.
or, what the relationship was, if any, or like why. Um, so yeah, and again, then yeah, did he really come alone? Did he meet anybody along his way? And again, are we going to see his what are the Discord servers and all these online groups? Like that's where it's like, yeah, was he talking to anybody else who made any suggestions at any point, or was maybe priming him or nudging him in some way? Given everything we know about like actual things like 764, Order of Nine Angles, the Littleton shootings, right? They like the internet was around back then. They were
Yeah.
all on forums and stuff. And so that was DARPA's debut, right? Mainlining the internet and, finally bringing on these cybernetic systems on into the World Wide Web, which is what they were ultimately always, meant to be, right? To create this new world brain and industrial feedback machine that could like provide the right feedback to all the different caves. As Matthew Crawford, right? There's just caves and people are being put in different caves and everyone has its own little local cybernetic system that's then also feeding into like a bigger cybernetic system. And that one feeds into a bigger one.
Mm.
And so yeah, that's the beginning internet. And so if these mass shooters were there, I haven't, there's more to look into, right? Like we had a Montreal Dawson shooting. I don't know the story with that one, but
I remember
I know
that.
he was on forums because I know
Yeah.
that a girl in my high school, yeah, she was crying because she had actually talked to him. Yeah, because I was in high school back then. So he was on like, it was like a goth vampire website kind of thing. So, you got a lot of emo. Emo was big back then, all those bands from
Well, on that note too, you shared with me the photograph that you found on X of these various school shooters,
right.
and they're all wearing, what is it, the KMFDM
Yeah.
shirts, the which stands, it's like this industrial metal band with super nihilistic lyrics that's been around since the 80s.
Yeah.
It's like a German. I wrote down their name. It's called Keine Mehrheit für die Mittelland, and this is what the Columbine shooters were wearing. They were listening to their lyrics in 1999 as they were going in to do their mass shooting campaign. And it's like you look at all of these other young people who all did mass shootings in the following years in schools usually, and they're wearing the same bloody black shirt with the KMFDM logo, listening to the music.
Right.
There's the case of I wrote down a few, the Philippine shooter in June 2026, the January 2024 17-year-old who posted one of the KMFDM songs and then shot up her high school, killing two, wounding her way
Right.
more. Another 15-year-old shooter, Natalie Rupno, killed her teacher and another student in Wisconsin wearing again that same shirt. So there's something. And then I listened to some of the lyrics of some of the popular music that these guys write for Hollywood films. They write for
Really?
video games. Yeah.
I
They're
didn't know that.
anti-industrial, like they're anti-civilization. They're super nihilistic. They make you their lyrics often nudge young people towards basically wanting to die and hating humanity.
The
It's
video literally has like, it's almost cartoonish, but I mean, it's again, it's directed at a certain demographic, like kill, destroy,
yeah.
megalomania, and like it just feed it literally like the Clockwork Orange or cartoonish idea of like subliminal messaging, but like they just have it, and it's like kill, destroy, da da da. Uh, so yeah, and I was even thinking you do have this strange
Okay.
phenomenon where, because you need a culture, right? For any of these kind of ops as well. Like we're talking about all these different cults. Manson had Stranger in a Strange Land. All these programmed, all these assassins were reading Catcher in the Rye,
Mm.
right? The guy who killed John Lennon in this, and you find that
Yeah, JD Salinger. They're
yeah, the book keeps re-emerging in all, same story. The killer was reading that. So you seem to have certain things that are selected, or a community is built around a certain, cultural, zeitgeist or whatnot. So yeah, is KDM FM, maybe there's a community for that. And that's where initially people run into other like-minded people, right? That
mm,
are into that. That's like a beginning first step to seeing who's not just like some emo, kid kind of just, doing the whole, emo posture thing for a while, going through a phase, and who are the people that are actually not afraid to like pull the trigger, right? Who's disturbed enough, and
mm.
who resonates with like the philosophy, right? Like you bring them into something much
Right.
deeper, right? They go much further into
You
the labyrinth, and so
exactly. Yeah, and they will then be where most people are consuming Catch from the Rye on the first degree level of just the emotional feelings they get from it, or they'll listen to this death metal music, this with of KMFDM. They'll listen to it for the pure emotional reasons, but some people will go deeper into the lyrics. They'll go deeper to the next level, and that small percentage will then be susceptible to all sorts of um traps that are set for them on that deeper level below the symbols. And I was just thinking, when you scratch on the surface of a lot of these personalities like J.D. Salinger, like Robert Heinlein, you find usually not some authentic emergent
right,
creator, even though their books and their writings have become iconic and influential. Yeah, Elon Musk said the greatest work that ever influenced his identity is Robert Heinlein's "The Moon is a Cruel Mistress,"
right,
which is like a libertarian sort of Bible, a gospel. So
right,
Heinlein himself is tied. He's actually swapping wives with L. Ron Hubbard. They're part of the exact same little writers guild, writers commune cult that's swapping wives together.
Yeah, it was a free love
California.
cult, right? It was like the ideal free love community.
But they're all tied to intelligence operations.
Yeah.
But all of them are. And then this guy Salinger, you go to his Wikipedia page, and right there in World War II, he was assigned to counterintelligence, also known as the Ritchie Boys, in which he used his proficiency in French and German to interrogate prisoners of war. Who else is doing that? Ewan Cameron from Tavistock, and who was running the MK Ultra thing, was the one who was assigned to interrogate Rudolf Hess and many Nazi prisoners of war. Right. And so this guy's involved in.
Yeah, they're not nobodies. They're not. So yeah, anyone who at this point, if anyone's still like, maybe someone has a gag reflex and like, oh, this sounds schizo, though you probably would have tuned out earlier if you felt like. But imagine there still is somebody listening, and it's like, okay, is this schizo? There's all these different patterns and things. You at least want to like take a look, right? Like, what are the actual details of the case? And a lot of people who just want to dismiss things, right? Because they don't believe in conspiracies, which again, my take is it's just as radical to believe, to think you don't believe in any conspiracies as like the QAnon, Q-tard, like full hog, everything's a conspiracy. Like they're both just as radical, right? The real question is some conspiracies are real, some are made up. And how can we use our discernment to know what's what? Like it comes back to the same kind of question we'd have to ask in respect to our knowledge about anything, right? It's like you got to look at the details of a case, and there are red flags. And so if you see red flags, and somebody who doesn't believe in conspiracy theories usually just rationalizes these things. Oh, of course there's FBI informants, they're trying to stop terrorism. Of course they're going to, okay, but like, did they give weapons or not? Like, what was their actual
Did they
goal?
recruit? Did they radicalize the members of the cell? Are they like,
Mr. Normie is not interested in like asking those questions.
Yeah.
Right. So they'll hear you to a certain point, but yeah, they're just not interested. And hey, we get it. Right. Like Matthew Crawford mentioned this in the last one, like there is kind of trauma that is then associated with that, because you need some kind of coherent system to think about the world. And as Tim Dillon was saying, people who've just kind of gone through a formal academic career, which again, not necessarily bad in of itself. There's great academics, right? We know great scholars, but everything has been presented to them kind of with guardrails, right? Like everything has a framework. Everything has a procedure and a methodology. So when they encounter something that's outside that just doesn't fit anywhere, like they just can't place it in any way without like destroying the rails, right? And like the whole thing just falling apart, there's a crisis, right? Like that's normal, right? It's something to be understood. And it's like, yeah, if they have that crisis and look, they have a family, they have children, they have like a day job that they can't, just leave. Do they have the emotional or spiritual bandwidth to then go down some Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole where they don't even know who they'll be at the other end, right? So in a certain, you can understand, right? I'm not like, oh, let's all be normies now, but right, we have to be charitable. And then because then the question is, so how do we have these conversations in a way that is productive and healthy and isn't meant to just like traumatize people, or you don't feed a baby a ribeye, right? Like there's certain things you have to have infrastructure or be in a certain place to metabolize certain things in terms of your development, and that should be true for ideas, right? It is true for ideas. And it's not like a bad or good thing, right? Like everybody has had a different course, but in 2026, it's like there's enough evidence to be like, yeah, we all need to maybe temper, if we're still subscribing to the official story and we just read The Economist and The Atlantic, it's like, no, we can broaden our horizons.
Do better. You can do better than that.
Yeah. I like that. We're all going to do better.
I think that this conversation, I really appreciate chatting with you, Dave. I always do. And I think that this has inspired a lot of people to also want to do better and ask the questions that your society might tell you shouldn't ask, or maybe your instincts having been put through the abnormal school system, the Saturnian school system of unnatural limits,
Right.
that breaks us of our Promethean longing to go and leap beyond into the unknown. Maybe that those instincts that are inside of us are bad instincts, and that we should actually have a bit more confidence in what we can ask and what we can answer as far as questions, if we allow ourselves the humility and the passion for truth to go there, to the forbidden zones.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this was good. And Dave, I'm gonna just let people know that your book, your New Liar anthology, is just out now. Your newest edition for summer 2026.
Yeah, we got
Your
yeah, it's the latest. This isn't the latest one, but yeah, we got a bunch of them. So yeah, the new one is going to drop on Substack in the next days. And yeah, there's a check out Exiting the Cave, right? So now we just did a show together and we have a lot of fun guests. So that's now we got to exit the cave, right? We're
got to exit the
having
cave.
fun.
All right, make Plato happy. All right, Dave, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us for this week's Canadian Patriot podcast. Take care.